Well, howdy. Good to be with you. We're still with the blind man, but I want to say something about the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah was one of the prophets that said a whole lot of prophecies about the Messiah. And the Jews in Jesus' day knew that Isaiah was a prophet who spoke about the Messiah that they were looking for. And one of the things it said about the Messiah in Isaiah chapter 29, verse 18, on that day the deaf will hear the words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness the eyes of the blind will see. And so they should have expected to see a sign that Jesus was the Messiah. Here's a man that hadn't just lost his eyesight, he was born with blindness. And so they're asking him questions. You know, there are basically two reasons to ask people questions. One is because you're curious and you really want an answer. And another is that you're trying to find something wrong. And they weren't curious. They were desperate. Desperate to find something wrong with this miracle. And so they've called the blind man back a second time, and they're asking him the same questions. They said to him, verse 26, chapter 9, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? You do not want to become his disciples too, do you?" They reviled him, called him names, said, "You're his disciple, but we're disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we don't know where he is from." The man answered and said to them, I think he's getting sarcastic, "Well, here's an amazing thing. You do not know where he's from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he hears him. Since the beginning of time, it's never been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sins, and you're teaching us." And they put him out of the synagogue. Notice, born entirely in sins. Remember what the rabbis who drink too much coffee had to say. You can sin in the womb. And they believed that he was born blind because he sinned in the womb. You were born in sins, and you're trying to teach us? Blind Pharisee is what Jesus said in Matthew 23. Blind leaders, he called them in Matthew 23. And so his verdict that he came up with is he's from God somehow. He's a prophet, or he's more than a prophet, or he couldn't do this. And their verdict was, oh, but he did it on the Sabbath, so he can't be from God. Because they didn't want to believe. I recommend, don't try to read this book in its entirety. It can get quite boring because he makes his point, and then after he's made his point, he brings in everything to make his point that he doesn't need to bring in. But anyway, Josh McDowell has a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And he'll make a point, and then everything else that supports the point, he's going to bring that in too. He's very, very thorough. But it really comes across very clearly, demanding the verdict, that there is one God, the creator of the entire world, and there's one mediator between man and God, and that's Jesus. It's evidence that demands a verdict. There was a verdict that was demanded of these guys here, and they refused to accept it. Once again, remember yesterday or the day before we talked about Romans chapter 1, where it says, unbelievers are without excuse. Have a great day. Don't be a Pharisee.